Hey there, welcome into the College Basketball Bracket Science YouTube channel and podcast network. I'm your host for today. Today we're going to be talking about the 2025-26 college basketball season hot takes. We're going to get just, slightly warm with some. We're going to get pretty scorching hot with a few of these. They're all subjective, so it's all up to your opinion. I'll leave it up to you on how hot these takes are. I wanted to include like a list of this is 9 out of 10 hotness. This is only 3 out of 10 hotness. But this idea basically just stemmed from me just, listening. I listened to a bunch of, coach interviews in the preseason, talking about their team, talking about a few things. I look at the non-conference schedules way too much, as more than I should, but it's just an exciting time, whereas we're just over a week away from college hoops starting. So we're going to talk, everything from teams that I see are underrated to some teams that I might see are overrated, teams I might see making the NCAA tournament that you're not expecting, some teams that, should make the NCAA tournament and just might not based on some fit. I listen to a lot of stuff, as mentioned, a little bit of public just knowledge as well, some team fans that we're talking about. So just a few changing opinions from what I released in my preseason rankings just a couple weeks ago. But let's not talk too much. Let's dive right into it and talk about some of the hot takes. I believe we're going to have 12 of them. So we'll talk a little bit about each one of them and why they're on there. But before we do, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, turn on the post notifications, as we're going to be talking about individual games and a lot of betting stuff once the season comes around. So you don't want to miss that. And also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Bracket Science with 2 S's in it. So be sure to go check that out. And without further ado, let's dive right into it. Our first hot take, these are in no particular order whatsoever. It's just going to be flying all over the place from conference to mid-majors and everything else. So we're going to start with this. We're going to start with Arizona reaches number 1 in the AP poll this season. So this is a team that I have continuously keep growing on. The roster construction is incredibly underrated. They have a little bit of everything, and just the things I've seen. I will also mention before diving into this has nothing to do with exhibitions. I take every single one of those games and just basically throw it out. I like to look at individual players and see what they're capable of. So for example, with Arizona, Motejais Krivas looked awesome as long as he's healthy. I know he's awesome. That's part of the reason with this, that little platoon that they're going to have with Motejais Krivas and Toby Awaka, probably playing 20 to 25 minutes a piece a night. I really like that. It's all going to kind of rely on the freshmen with Braden Burries and with Koa Pete. And we got Jaden Bradley running the point, who is a tremendously underrated defender. He's known for his defense, but just underrated in general. He's a really good basketball player. And I really like what this Arizona team's going to be. And looking into their non-conference schedule, their opening night, they're the game of the night, November 3rd on Monday. They will play Florida in Vegas, so it's kind of a semi-home game it's technically a neutral site game labeled by Ken Pom. What might even be a hotter take than Arizona reaching number 1 in the AP poll, I think Arizona is going to beat Florida in this opening night game. I think Florida's going to have some things to figure out. I like the matchup for Arizona. Arizona can, kind of complement Florida's bigs with Krivas and Awaka. As we mentioned, throw Koa Pete in there as well. Especially with it being a somewhat of a home environment, being in Vegas. And I think Jaden Bradley's going to be able to guard Boogie Flandon. I'm not quite sure where all the scoring is going to come from Florida. They're going to be great offensively, but just against this Arizona team, I think it's a particularly good matchup for Arizona. So Arizona's 13th in the preseason AP poll. Florida is 3rd. I think Arizona's going to beat them, jump in, probably the top 5. And then they get Utah Tech and Northern Arizona in 2 home games after that, which no doubt they'll win. In fact, they have a 99% chance to win via Ken Pom. And then after that is a big one against UCLA. This game will take place in Inglewood, California. So a little bit of an away game. It's a semi-away game for according to Ken Pom. But I believe if Arizona were to go win that game, you might be looking at the number 1 team in the country. Now, that might depend on what, the top teams are doing. Purdue, Houston, what are they doing early in the season? But Houston primarily gets off to, last year they got off to a little bit of a slower start. And I saw Kelvin Sampson say in an interview, we might hit some speed bumps in the non-conference, but I'm expecting by conference play to be blazing hot. So that also leads into this hot take as well. And then after that, they have a true away game at UConn. So it's going to be those first 4 games. I think if Arizona starts off 4-0 to start the season, it's going to be either them or Purdue at number 1 in the country. So this is a little bit of a hot take, kind of asking for a lot, but I am in on this Arizona team. All right, speaking of UConn, UConn wins the Big East by 2+ games. Maybe a little bit of a bold take here. St. John's was actually picked by the Big East media to win slightly over UConn. However, UConn's ranked a little bit higher in the AP poll. I just love this UConn construction of their lineup. I think it's perfect, honestly. Solo Ball is getting a lot of hype as like, yeah, this could be the player of the year in the Big East. Yeah, he could be. I think he's their second or third best player. As crazy as that sounds, I think Terrace Reed is going to be awesome. So I wanted to kind of include that in this hot take. I think Terrace Reed could be the Big East player of the year. People are going to get known to Terrace Reed as long as he stays out of foul trouble. I think he's going to be awesome. He is a freak athlete. I think he's going to climb up draft boards. So Solo Ball, Terrace Reed, and then the addition of Silas Demery just fits Dan Hurley's system perfectly. We'll see what Braylon Mullins is going to be. I expect him to kind of be similar to Liam McNeely. I think a lot of people are, kind of predicting, as well as for skill set, but he's not going to be asked to do nearly as much as Liam McNeely was last year. So I think it's just going to be a beautiful fit for this roster, along with Alex Caravan, who's just an unbelievable, just winning player. I think he's going to return to form after his kind of, just down year last year. Then the other thing is just St. John's. I'm a little bit concerned about the roster, the roster construction. I'm not concerned about the talent at all. I think they're going to be probably the most talented roster if you just look at individual talent in the entire country. However, Ian Jackson came into the season like Rick Pitino was saying, yeah, he's the next great St. John's point guard. Reportedly, he's not even going to play point guard anymore, and it's going to be Oziah Sellers, who, guess what, has also never played point guard. He's a great shooter, great off-ball shooter, so I'm just a little bit worried about that. I wouldn't be surprised if Dylan Darling ends up being the starting point guard. However, it seems like they're doing pretty much everything in their power to get away from that, so that's a little bit concerning to me. Bryce Hopkins' health, also a little bit of a concern, but I think St. John's is going to be good. However, I am a lot higher on this UConn team. I placed a few too many bets on UConn this upcoming season to win the Big East. Also, for those who follow the podcast, also my national champion pick for the preseason. All right, moving on, but staying in the same realm, San Diego State wins the Mountain West by 2+ games. Brian Dutcher's done a great job here. They were in the race last year to win the Mountain West, and they pretty much, they have more roster continuity this year. They bring back Reese Waters, who was hurt last year. Magoon Guath is going to continue to grow, as is Miles Bird. I think this team's going to be awesome, and I think the Mountain West is going to be down this year. We say that every year, but as opposed to last year, we'll see just how close Utah State can maybe get. We know that Utah State home environment. Utah State will probably be favored at home against San Diego State. I wouldn't be surprised. Boise State is the other one in there that, I think New Mexico is going to be, a little bit of a rebuild year this upcoming season. They also are adding Grand Canyon this upcoming season, along with UNLV should be much improved under Josh Pastner. But I think there's a little bit of a big separation this year from San Diego State to, I'll say 2 games, to Utah State, and then Utah State and Boise State kind of in the same category. And then from there on, I think there's a big gap. So I think San Diego State is going to win the Mountain West by 2+ games this upcoming year with their continuity, with their coaching, and with their overall talent. All right, staying in the mid-major realm, I think the Atlantic 10 returns to multi-bid status this year. I think this could be the year. We talk about it every year, and they've been a consistent one-bid league lately. I think this year their top half is so good and their bottom half is just so iffy that it could really become a 2-bid league. Loyola Chicago, I've talked about a lot lately. I think Drew Valentine has done a great job there. They made a huge run last year in the NIT, which not a lot of people really talked about. They had a pretty deep run there, and they return a lot of pieces. Even I know we talked about the Sister Jean aspect. It's kind of just a revival year for Loyola Chicago. I think there's just a lot of things falling into place there. St. Louis should be awesome this year under Josh Schertz. Kind of flew under the radar last year. That was a big hire last year. Then they just couldn't stay healthy, just weren't that good. I think this year they're going to be much improved. We know what Dayton and VCU bring in every year. They bring in a ton of talent. VCU is, the computer favorite to win this conference. They got a lot of talent. We'll see what Phil Martelli Jr. can do in the first year there. And Dayton, we know they're also going to have a tremendous home court environment along with a tremendous amount of talent there. And then George Washington, kind of the other team to know. I've gotten a lot of hype this offseason. They have a really talented roster, should be in the mix thing. So that's 5 teams right there. And that's not even including Tony Skinn at George Mason. That's probably pretty much. Maybe St. Bonaventure if they can get hot. Well coached there. But so you're talking about a lot of options to potentially be, in the mix for an at-large berth. I think two of them, that's kind of what the A10 needs to hope, is that two or three of them really separate come conference play. And, Dayton always has a tremendous non-con schedule. Loyola Chicago's is good. VCU's is great, as is St. Louis. So I think the A10 gets two bids this upcoming season. Next up is an individual player. Labaron Philon becomes a first-team All-American. This is probably not on a lot of people's ballots, probably not even a third-team All-American to a lot of people. However, it's a little bit of the combination of buying into the player, buying into the system, and buying into the coach. Alabama loses a lot. They were preseason number 2 in the AP poll last year, and they were incredibly deep. Now they lose a lot of pieces, but I think Labaron Philon is going to step in and just be a monster. He's going to be their go-to guy. I said it all year last year, just watching this guy. He is an eye test, just, passes the eye test with flying colors. He is a tremendous athlete, incredibly fast. I said it last year. I'm like, if he can develop a shot, this guy's going to be the best guard in college basketball here soon. Because I didn't expect him to go to the draft just because of that shot. I know that ended up being kind of an unpopular opinion. A lot of people thought he was going to go, but it seemed like he had 2 feet in and then ended up, coming back. And I think it's going to be if there's a guy who's, there's a system that is allowing you to develop a shot, it is Alabama. They're going to play so fast. He's going to get his shots up. He's good on the defensive side as well. He's a tremendous on-ball defender. He's a great passer. I think Labaron Philon's going to be awesome. If Alabama is a top 3, top 4, not overall, but, a 4 seed, 3 seed, 2 seed, even get up to a 1 seed in March Madness, I think Labaron Philon's going to have a real case as a first-team All-American. All right, next up, in the blue blood category, let's talk about Kansas. I think Kansas will be a top 3 seed in the NCAA tournament this upcoming season. Now, why? I know they lost a ton of talent. They lost Hunter Dickinson, who scored in the NBA. How about that? A lot of people were saying, he's going to be a LinkedIn guy, which I'm not even saying I disagreed with you, but he scored in the NBA in his opening game. Pretty cool stuff there. They lose DeJuan Harris. They lose KJ Adams. So they had to replace those guys, and probably for the better. I think Kansas fans are, you can't say they're more excited going into this season than last season, because they were preseason number 1 last season, but they also lose AJ Storr to the transfer portal, which I don't think Kansas fans are too unhappy about. We'll get to him here in a little bit. But I think just this, building back the identity of what Bill Self built up, 14 straight years of at least having a share of the Big 12 title regular season is just unbelievable. We had Coach K in the game, who many people consider to be the greatest college basketball coach of all time. And a lot of people thought that Bill Self is a better X's and O's coach than Coach K. That was a popular argument. So Bill Self is there. Is there a correlation between his health problems he's had the past couple of years and what, how they weren't awful. They were a 4 seed 2 years ago and a 7 seed last year. Not good by Kansas standards, but that's still like solid seasons. I think just getting rid of those 3 guys, I think just a reset year and building your team around Darren Peterson. There's also been a lot of hype around, a couple of the other, most notably Rosario as a freshman, supposedly is going to be sent into the starting lineup along with a couple of the other pieces that they added, Trey White, Jaden Dawson, Flory Badunga is back. The only worry I really have about this Kansas team is maybe the backup center depth for Flory Badunga if he gets in foul trouble. Melvin Council, also another guard. I know I'm missing a few other pieces, but a lot of information on the top of the head right now. So I have them being, I'm not going to predict it. These are hot takes, but if they're a top 3 seed in the NCAA tournament, would not be surprised at all. Darren Peterson could be, in the mix for National Player of the Year, and Flory Badunga, hopefully, as long as he stays healthy, could be awesome. And I think Kansas, with Bill Self, with a star, with some supporting pieces, will be back at the top of the sport, towards the top of the sport this upcoming season. All right, now let's talk about 2 teams in one, talking about the ACC. Syracuse so yes, I'm cheating a little bit by saying or Virginia Tech make the NCAA tournament this upcoming season. Syracuse has an incredibly underrated roster this year. Nathan George transfers in from Georgia Tech. They bring back Donnie Freeman. They bring back JJ Starling. William Kyle is another well-known name, transfers in from UCLA. this team has a lot of talent. Like if Coach Adrian Autry wasn't the head coach here, people would be predicting them to be a tournament team. That's the only thing. It's like you really shouldn't fail with this roster. However, Autry had a good year 2 years ago. Last year obviously was not good at all. It's just which version of it. He's got the most talented roster he's had. This should be an NCAA tournament team, even if Adrian Autry just does a decent job. You're going to see him so lowly ranked by most rankings because of the Adrian Autry effect, quite frankly, as sad as that sounds. Now, Virginia Tech, there was a lot of talks last year on whether Virginia Tech would move on from Mike Young. They basically came out with a statement saying, we could fire Mike Young and bring in a new coach, and then that always leads to, your investors investing more money because you're buying into the coach. It's something new. It's something shiny and new. They want to buy into it. They basically said, why don't we just do this with Mike Young? Like Mike Young was our guy when we went out and got him a couple years ago. Why don't we just do this with him? Which I think is a great strategy because I don't think Mike Young's a bad coach. I don't remember who it was on Virginia Tech last year who said, we were, paraphrasing, we were bad, but we weren't that bad. Like we were expected to be bad, but we weren't as bad as people thought, which is kind of a credit to Mike Young, I guess, because that roster was horrible last year. It was, and they weren't as bad as some people, including myself, most people projected. So that kind of shows what Mike Young and maybe, saved his job. Neokolis Avdalis, I believe is how it's pronounced, is their huge foreign recruit who's like got NBA draft buzz. That's who the picture is on the screen right here. He's going to be an absolute stud, an absolute guy to know. 6'8", can shoot the lights out of basketball. His tape looks phenomenal. His I would recommend going and watching his tape. He's going to be really good, at least from what I've seen. They also bring in Amani Hansberry, the transfer from West Virginia, just a big force in the paint. I like that. Hyzier Miller's there as well, Tyler Johnson. This could be a sneaky, really good team in the ACC this year. If the ACC is looking to get, 6 to 8 teams, which is, 7 or 8 teams is high expectations. I think they should be expecting to get 6 teams. You got your top 5. You got Duke, Louisville, North Carolina, NC State, and Virginia in whatever order you want to put them in. Then after that, it's a little bit up for grabs. You got Virginia Tech, Syracuse, Miami. You've got who else am I missing in that category? Clemson. Yeah, you can't count out Brad Brownell. SMU is going to be right there. Notre Dame, Wake Forest probably going to have a little bit of a down year. We'll see what Luke Laux can do at Florida State. I think it's Virginia Tech and Syracuse are kind of my 2 teams in that realm to kind of climb up and maybe get in the NCAA tournament. So Syracuse, Virginia Tech, keep an eye on them this upcoming season. So positive for Syracuse and Virginia Tech. We're going to go negative on the other side with Ohio State and Texas. Ohio State and Texas have been kind of linked together. They played last year in the college football playoff. They played this year opening night in college football, or their opening week in college football was that big game where Ohio State beat them. They also beat them last year. And then in opening night last year in basketball, they played each other where Ohio State also got the better of Texas. So luckily for Texas fans, you don't have Rodney Terry anymore. You have Sean Miller coming in probably because of, you're a big brand. You shouldn't be a play-in team. They've got a ton of talent. However, I'm a little bit worried. Let's talk about Texas first. A little bit worried about the, just the overall roster fit. I think Rodney Terry is a lot to blame for that. I'm just pulling up the roster real quick while I have my cheat. I know like the 2 that I'm really concerned about is Jordan Pope and Tremont Mark working together because it didn't work together too fantastically last year. Sean Miller does bring in a couple of his pieces. However, I'm a little bit concerned about how they'll transfer from a Xavier team that underperformed last year. I know they had some injury problems, but I was a little disappointed in the job that Sean Miller did last year. I think one of my hot takes last year was like Xavier could win the Big East, and they had the talent to do it. You see all the hype Ryan Conwell's getting transferring to Louisville. You see Zach Fremantle is awesome. They also had Dalen Swain and Marcus Foster's the other one. They had some pieces and just weren't that good. So I'm a little bit concerned about what Dalen Swain does come with Sean Miller. So brings in a little bit of continuity. He also brings Traore. Shendell Weaver is still there. I like Shendell Weaver a lot. So I think you've got a few pieces. However, it's Tremont Mark, Jordan Pope, Simeon Wilcher kind of manning the backcourt. There's a lot of mouths to feed right there and not a lot of, real winning players, I guess. I know Tremont Mark played at played at Houston for a stint there, then transferred to Arkansas, where he had his problems there, and then now to Texas. We'll see how he can kind of build that relationship with Jordan Pope, who is a guy who needs the ball in his hands as well, just like Tremont Mark. And where does that leave Simeon Wilcher, who should be like an up and coming sophomore junior breakout candidate? I don't know. It seems like a lot of mouths to feed. And then where's that leave Shendell Weaver? You got to have him in there as well. A little bit concerned about the height as well. Lassina Traore, as we mentioned, transferring up with Sean Miller. Will he be able to be a starting center? They also brought in Motes Vokatitis from Florida Atlantic, who is a 7-footer, but he was playing at Florida Atlantic last year. No disrespect to Florida Atlantic, going from Florida Atlantic to the SEC. It's not Vlad Golden transferring up, which we knew he could do. Vokatitis was good last year. Is he going to be able to transfer up to this level and really, be a lead like shot blocker in the SEC? A little bit concerned about this. And then they also bring in Cam Heide, who I also should mention. Great athlete. So what does their starting lineup look like? What does their, rotation look like? I don't know. It seems like some people have individual talent, but it doesn't seem to fit at all. And we're not talking about individual talent like St. John's. So we'll see. A little bit concerned about Texas. If they miss the NCAA tournament, I wouldn't be completely surprised. It shouldn't be what they're expecting. They should expect to be, wearing home whites in the opening round. They should be an 8 seed or better with the talent and with hopefully Sean Miller as a good coach. But we'll see. Wouldn't be incredibly surprised if they're not. Then Ohio State. Ohio State returns, a big three that can compete with just about anybody. John Mobley, Bruce Thornton, who's one of the most underrated players in the entire country, and Devin Royal. I'm also bringing up their lineup as we speak here. They are getting ranked very high by the computers because their offensive upside is going to be incredible. However, are they going to guard anybody? And are they going to have any rim protection? So we mentioned those big three. John Mobley's about 6 foot, as is Bruce Thornton. Devin Royals, probably playing up to the 4 as about a 6'5", 6'6" kind of guy. So where does the size come from? You got Christoph Tilley, who's also transferring up from Santa Clara. He's 7 foot. I like how he fits. However, after that, I'm not a fan of the roster at all. I'm very concerned with the depth. I like that top 4. Josh Ojonwuna transfers up, and he looks like a behemoth of a man. He is ripped. However, we kind of know what we're going to get from Josh Ojonwuna. He's not a scorer. He's just kind of a big body. No disrespect intended. Then after that, who plays? Tayson Chapman is, probably going to be the next guy in line. They bring in Gabe Cupps, this might be an unpopular, this might be a hot take for some. I don't know how Gabe Cupps is still like in Division I. I know he's only a sophomore, and last year he got some time at Indiana, but man, he should not have been getting time at Indiana. I know he's a home cooking boy from Ohio, so going back to Ohio State, maybe something works. He's supposedly just like a hard worker, but if this guy is a guy you're relying on, it's not going to be well. So if he's probably your 7th man, I'm a little concerned about the depth. I like the big three. I think they're really going to score it with Thornton, Mobley, and Royal. And they also do have Jake Diebler as the coach. No, I'm not here to, really just hate on guys, but nothing has really shown me that he's going to take the next step from Chris Holtmann. I will continue to say Chris Holtmann's a better basketball coach than Jake Diebler is as of now. I think he's going to be good in the future. However, I don't think he's ready yet. He needs the experience. I thought he would, end up after Holtmann being a kind of a mid-major guy. Diebler would end up being a mid-major guy and then working his way up. He says all the right things. You can tell he really buys into intensity, which I really like. However, the X's and O's just don't look any different or better than what Holtmann was doing and kind of failing at Ohio State. I don't think he's as good as Holtmann as a coach, quite frankly. So I'm a little bit worried about that aspect. So Texas and Ohio State, 2 teams that have kind of been linked together for a while to miss the NCAA tournament, another hot take. Alrighty, next up is that Gonzaga will be a top 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. Now, I know you're thinking they didn't get Tyon Grant Foster approved yet. He is appealing the whole process, so we'll see where that leaves them. However, I still think this team's going to be awesome, and what's going to be the last year of, the WCC with Gonzaga. Gonzaga has, kind of dominated the conference, them and St. Mary's for a very long time. I think it's kind of a going away party. It's all leading up to that, along with their roster, which I really like. This seems like Mark Few kind of guys. So they bring in Braden Smith, not Braden Smith from Purdue. Braden Smith, who was formerly at Colgate, was the Patriot League Player of the Year a couple years ago. He transferred in actually last year, decided to redshirt behind Ryan Nembhard. And Ryan Nembhard's in the NBA now. And, just a little side note, he scored before Cooper Flagg and Dylan Harper did the other night. How about that? Just like everyone thought, Ryan Nembhard, the first freshman scorer in that game. But, Braden Smith got to see what Nembhard did, and he led the country in assists last year. And I like that. I like that a lot. To me, that says a lot about a guy that he's willing to do that. And that, he's learning from a kind of a Gonzaga legend. So they have Braden Smith. They have potentially they have the best front court mid-major lineup in the country. Probably top 10 in the entire country with Graham Ike and Braden Huff. They should be, they're highly thought of by most. Believe it or not, a little bit lower on both of these players, but I do still think they're very good players. Graham Ike could be an All-American this year. However, I don't think he's going to need to be because this team has so many pieces. Adam Miller is one of the more underrated players, I believe, in the entire country. He played for Bobby Hurley, so for those who listen to me a lot, I'm not a big fan of when, a lot of transferring and you're not at the greatest, program / coaches, however you want. So he was at Illinois and started on an NCAA tournament team, went to Arizona State, played for Bobby Hurley, and now he comes to Mark Few. So obviously Mark Few saw a lot in him. He's a tremendous scorer of the basketball. I think he could be really good in the system. Kind of replacing the Caliph Battle role last year. He's not going to be Caliph Battle, but he should be, kind of a more continuity piece, hopefully, for this Gonzaga team. They also bring in Jalen Worley, who also sat out last season after the whole thing with Virginia and Tony Bennett. But he's a tremendous defender. He can really guard the ball. If he can get some scoring down, he could be an elite player for this Gonzaga team. So, two guys that redshirted last year and, watch this Gonzaga program along with Adam Miller, who can really score. And then the continuity piece of the two guys in the front court with Braden Huff and, Graham Ike, excuse me. And you also got to note that Steele Venters should be back this upcoming season. Hopefully he can stay healthy. He's missed the previous 2 years with injuries, but he is an elite scorer. Hopefully, he's 100% and, returns to form. So that could be, a sneaky pick for sixth man of the year. Maybe he'll even start in the WCC. And then that's not even including if Tyon Grant-Foster end up being approved. So we'll see. I really like this Gonzaga team. I think they're a sneaky pick to legit, make a Final Four run yet again. All right, next up, Wisconsin is a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. Why would we not pick them as a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament? That's my big question. They've been incredibly consistent under Greg Gard the past 2 seasons. They were, for lack of a better words, transformative. They went from playing real slow, kind of just boring basketball. And even they kind of did a couple of years ago but AJ Storr really, kind of lifted that ceiling. And then last year, John Tonji just came out of nowhere. So they were a 5 seed 2 years ago, lost to James Madison in the first round. Then last year we're a 3 seed, played a really good game in the round of 32 against BYU, just ran into a blazing hot BYU team. And I think this roster this year could be just about as good as last year's. John Blackwell is going to step into the stardom role. A sneaky pick for like Big Ten Player of the Year. I know that's crazy to say with, it is crazy to say with Braden Smith and Donovan Dent, but a first team all conference kind of guy, I guess I should say. Nolan Winter is going to make a huge leap this upcoming year as well. Nick Boyd transfers in from San Diego State and Florida Atlantic. I talked about, Adam Miller playing for Bobby Hurley. Nick Boyd played for Brian Dutcher and Dusty May. I really like that about a guy. Now coming to Greg Gard, another just really sharp coach, really good scheme. Andrew Rohde transfers in from Virginia. They also bring in Austin Rapp. The depth is a little bit of a concern to me. However, Greg Gard has just shown he knows what he's doing in just, internally developing with guys. Obviously, John Tonji was like nowhere near the top of transfer list last year, and he was an All-American. He was awesome last season. I think John Blackwell is just going to have the keys to the kingdom, but I wouldn't be surprised if one of these other guys, really steps up as well and is a key piece to Wisconsin getting a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. Now, I do have one more hot take. I'm going to pull up this graphic, though, because for some reason the computer's not working and it's not letting me pull it up, but you can just, imagine the graphics up there. It's going to deal with Chris Beard and Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss makes the Sweet 16 for the second straight season. Last year, they were undervalued in the preseason. Chris Beard is an awesome basketball coach. Another, just like Greg Gard, there's guys where you just listen to him talk and you're like, That's an impressive guy. He knows what he's talking about. Chris Beard's another one of those. Think what you want about him off the court. On the court, he's a tremendous X's and O's guy. He's a great leader. Good runs a great program. We said we were going to mention AJ Storr. AJ Storr transfers from. We've talked about AJ Storr a lot on this podcast. Goes from Kansas to Ole Miss to play for Chris Beard. Chris Beard has nothing but great things to say. Says he thinks he's going to, return to his Wisconsin form, like we just talked about, and should, really be a key player here. James Scott transfers in from Louisville. Really underrated player. Could be a really key piece this upcoming season. They bring back Malik Dia. Corin Johnson is still there. I like this roster. I think they're criminally underrated right now. I'm seeing people put them like 13th in the SEC or 12th in the SEC. I think that's ridiculous. What has Chris Beard shown that he's going to finish there? Call me out if I'm wrong. I think they're a top half team in the. The roster doesn't what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't, it's not real bright. It's not real exciting, but with Chris Beard and with solid pieces and, the system he's built there, I think they're top half in the SEC this upcoming season. Now, the other ones I just will kind of mention, it doesn't really have to do with this season. I guess it might have to do with more next season. I think we're going to have a lot of coaching changes at the end of this season. Some high-level jobs could really be, opening. We talked about Jake Diebler at Ohio State. I know some people don't think he's really in the hot seat. I think he is. Hubert Davis is probably the most notable one. He's kind of the face of the hot seat. At North Carolina, we could see a numerous other ones. Kim English at Providence is another one who's got some high expectation. Even maybe Ed Cooley at Georgetown with higher expectation this upcoming season. So there's a lot of coaches to me that have kind of a make it or break it year. Maybe Penny Hardaway at Memphis even. So I think there's going to be if you are new to the show, go back and look at our coaching carousel grades, I believe is what it was in, where we graded all the coaches and then looked at some, or maybe I think we actually had a coaches on the hot seat segment. So go check that out. Coaches on the hot seat, where, I talk about a bunch of the coaches that, better have a pretty good season this upcoming season. So I think we're going to see a ton of turnover next year. Hopefully no retirements, but if history is, continuing, there's going to be some retirements. Hopefully it's not Bill Self because of health concerns. Tom Izzo is, getting up there in age. I would hate to see him, have to retire. So I think it's going to be a busy cycle next year. So I guess that would kind of go for next season. All right, that's going to do it for the show today. Just kind of talking about some hot takes. Be sure to like and subscribe before you head out. Be sure to also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Bracket Science with 2 S's. I love doing these preseason shows. However, I'm ready to talk about some actual games. Be sure to go check us out on Instagram and TikTok as well, because on Saturday, tomorrow, actually, this will release in the morning. So it'll be today when you're hearing this. I'm going to post our last show of the preseason is going to be a fan mail episode, a mailbag episode, where you ask me your questions and I just answer. You ask me your questions and I answer them on the show. I'll give you credit. I'll give you a shout out as your your Instagram username or TikTok username. Send me a DM on there. Comment on this video any questions you have, and I'll also get to them. I'm trying to figure out how to post post just a question on YouTube where you can just comment under it, your questions. So I'm going to try and figure that out as well. So like and subscribe and turn on the post notifications, follow us Instagram and TikTok, and be on the lookout for that mailbag. I believe is going to be either Monday or either Tuesday or Wednesday. So be on the lookout for that. That's always fun to, answer the questions that you guys actually want to hear about instead of me just yapping for too long. All right. Anyways, everyone enjoy the rest of the weekend. Have a safe weekend. We'll talk to you again real soon. A week and a half. Ball is returning. We'll see you soon.